Welcome back to another live episode of Positively Uncensored, your favorite reality TV and interview podcast. It's your host, Leah, and today we will be diving into Love is Blind Season 9, episodes 7 through 9. I initially had the title of this video called Sparkle Boobies and Chicken Smoothies, and I believe I changed the title, but know that I will be talking a lot more about Jordan and Megan's relationship this episode than I initially anticipated. These episodes, this season in general, Denver is a mess. And I find this interesting specifically because Married at First Sight Denver was also a mess. So I guess if anybody is following me that lives in Denver, please provide a personal experience as to what your dating life is like. Do you feel like you are seeing it accurately represented? Um, and do you plan to move? Basically, do you plan to move? Before we get into the episode, reminder that this podcast is sponsored by Audible. If you have not tried Audible, the QR code is in the top left corner. Audible gives you access to thousands of audiobooks, podcasts, and originals all in one place. I love it because as much time as I make to catch up on all of my reality TV shows, I lose time to read the books that are on my ever growing TBR list. If you find yourself in a similar situation and you think to yourself, I would love to have more time to read, but I just don't have it, then you could try out Audible and listen to your books while you're cooking, while you're in the car, while you're showering. If you'd like to try it for free, head to either the show notes or scan the QR code in the corner. And when you do, you are supporting the show. Without further ado, let's set the scene for these first few episodes. Again, if you are not caught up, spoilers are to be coming ahead. Let me check in with the chat too. Toya, it is so good to see you here. Hello. Haven't watched the new drop yet? Okay, so you can either stick along if you've decided that this season is just a little bit too much for you, or you can pause and come back to me. And then I'm also seeing Vanna says I was watching it right now, but I'll finish it after this. So spoilers ahead, and I'll let you know what episode I'm on as well, just in case at any point you would like to tap out of the conversation and then get back into your episodes and come back. I always like to let people know this, and I always hear such supportive comments and like feedback when I first start my lives, potentially like the first 10 minutes. I always have such a sense of anxiety. So if you hear me struggling to find my words, or if you hear like a little bit of a hitch in my voice, public speaking, talking in front of people, it's always been something that makes me nervous, which is ironic, right? Because I have a podcast. But as I go through, I get more comfortable, and I'm just really grateful for all of you who support me along the way. Hello to Kimberly. I haven't watched 8 or 9. I'll come back and I will be looking for you. So, episode 7, setting the scene. We are checking back in with Madison and Joe in their hotel room. And Madison and Joe are in drunken stupor. That's what I would call it. They are in quite their drunken stupor at this moment. And what was very clear to me is that there was no shortage or limitation on alcohol this season. The producers quite literally pumped them with alcohol. And it's something that I found interesting because as we got this new batch of episodes, anytime that they have an engagement where all of them are meeting up, it's very specifically without a lot of food. Like, granted, I guess it's up to their responsibility to eat before, but if you've ever have a night out, you end up ordering pizza halfway through. They have appetizers and small bites and then copious amounts of alcohol. So the scene should be set that Joe is very drunk, incoherent even, but so is Madison. And I want people to know when you hear me say the but, please don't turn me off if you're thinking I'm about to berate Madison, because I'm not. I've seen a lot of criticisms for how Madison handled the situation with Joe's drinking. And I think that for each of us, as we watch shows, I think it reveals something about either a personal experience that we've been through before or just how we generally feel about something altogether. And I think for me, I generally feel very cautious being around people who are inebriated. I don't like being at a bar. I start to feel a little bit of general sense of anxiety the drunker that people get. And that's just because of the personal experiences that I've had. With that being said, when somebody's drunk and you don't know them, you don't know when that reaction or interaction between them is going to potentially veer to the left. And I think that a lot of Madison's nerves was caused from number one, genuinely wondering if Joe was okay medically. Like, does he have alcohol poisoning? Am I going to have to keep my eye on him throughout the night and roll him over if he happens to throw up and vomit and potentially aspirate? Like, there are many things that she could be thinking. Add on the fact that she shared with him sort of the limitations that she has around her sight. So like that would be an added anxiety for her trying to like keep an eye on him. And then you add in that she just doesn't know what Joe is like drunk, if he's going to fly off the handle. And I saw a lot of people saying that like she was overreacting and that Joe wasn't presenting like he was an aggressive person. He just seemed like somebody who just woke up and seemed very out of it. And while that's true, when you're around somebody who's drunk, that can change at the drop of a hat. So I don't blame her for being anxious. So I just wanted to start out by saying that. But she is also very clearly drunk. And the reason that that context is important is because Madison is very emotional right now, the two of them don't have the ability to have a conversation because both of them are so incoherent that neither one of them can really understand, number one, what the other person needs, and number two, what they are even asking of each other. Madison asks one question and gets upset that Joe isn't answering, but Joe doesn't understand Madison's question. The two of them are just simply not sober enough to have a conversation. But she's drunk outside, emotional, rightly so, and crying on the patio. Meanwhile, Joe is inside the bedroom, slugging a Propel, trying to get some electrolytes in him, trying to get his fluids back, and laying in their bed, basically letting Madison know, hey, I can hear you crying. And it's like, not a very nice way to go about the situation, but he can hear her crying. And he's not going to get out of bed, but he basically asks Madison, like, do you want to come in here? And that's not what Madison is looking for. Now, typically, I think if both of them were sober, she potentially would have went in there and had a conversation. But in my opinion, what Madison was looking for in this moment was for Joe to come outside and console her and be a more active participant in how she was feeling emotionally. So she does not go inside, at least initially. After she cries things out for a while, she eventually gets into pajamas, takes off her makeup, and she climbs into bed. As Madison is climbing into bed, Joe hops out of bed. And it's at this point that he decides that he would like to get some food. Do they have food? What's the food situation? And Madison is just feeling embarrassed over the fact that she was crying and basically receiving no empathy from Joe. Now, is it normal that Joe, drunken Joe, would like to eat some food? Yeah. Okay. He slept through whatever length of the party was, hadn't eaten any more food, woke up. Both of them, to be honest, could benefit from some bread. I forget which Real Housewife it was where she was like, perhaps you just need some bread. Perhaps that's what needs to happen right now. But Joe is too drunk to figure out why Madison is angry or why she's embarrassed. And at this point, Madison removes herself and she goes into the second bedroom so that she can sleep apart and cry things out. And at this point, I mean this in the most kindest way, Madison needed to self soothe herself and just go to bed. You need to go to bed. Not that you're not valid, but you need to sleep this off because there's not going to be any restitution. I don't know if that's the right word, but there's not going to be anything worked out between the two of you right now. we simultaneously see Allie and Anton have a somewhat of a strange conversation about how she really wants to put makeup on him. And I don't know. At this point in my notes, I wrote that I felt like Allie was on a different maturity level than Anton, but hold the phone because then we see more of Anton's personality throughout the rest of these episodes. Jordan and Megan are back in their room. And mind you, Jordan and Joe were the lives of the party, right? They were the ones who were the most drunk, causing a scene, objectively being annoying to everybody else. It wasn't just Megan who felt that way, but they're back in their bedrooms and they are having a far more coherent conversation than what Joe and Madison are managing to have. And it's at this point that I begin to wonder if maybe Jordan wasn't as drunk as I perceived him to be, and if he was more sunburned or just feeling awkward. But they're back in the room, and Megan is crying over her disappointment that they would be the power couple. And Jordan asks her, "Do you think Madison and Joe are the power couple? like who's the power couple in the group? Do you think that Nick and what's her face, Annie are the power couple?" And basically he's sort of saying a similar sentiment to what Calabria was telling Edmund. Don't compare our relationship. Speaking of Edmund and Calabria, they hold on, sorry. Okay. They are now having lunch and they're having a conversation about the argument that they had the night before in bed, where Edmund began to cry that he couldn't have sex with Calabria. I have a lot of thoughts about Edmund, and I'm going to sprinkle some of them in this episode that I refrained from saying in the last episode because I just kind of wanted to talk it over with some of my friends to see if I changed my mind on some things. So I will probably have a lengthy opinion on Edmund at some point in this episode. But they're having lunch and they're talking about the conversation last night. And Edmund is really sort of changing his tune now. And he's saying that he appreciates KB for making him realize that because they're not going to be intimate right away, when they are going to have sex for the first time, things will be even more special for the two of them. They're strengthening their bonds in these coming weeks. And I don't know if Edmund really believes this or if that's just what he's saying to KB, if that's what he's trying to convince himself of. It should be noted that simultaneously, Edmund is wearing a floral lavender or lilac colored shirt. And in his hair, he has a bushel, like a whole bushel of lavender in his pick. I think he looks like art. Like I mean like it's quite a look. I don't know if Calabria is in love with that. I she did mention once before that he wears his pick on every single excursion that they go to. So I'm not sure like what she thinks about his style, but I'll be interested to hear. Meanwhile, Annie and Nick are sitting by the pool and she talks to Nick about the things that her father had said to her before she left for the experience. And this is where we start to hear a little bit of where Annie gets some of her politics. Okay. Calls coming from within inside of the house always, because her dad told her before she left, "I hope that you find somebody who's manly enough to be with you." Now, Nick questions if that's the only criteria that Annie has for what she was looking for in a partner. And Annie responds with, "That's really more of the criteria of like what my dad wants for me is somebody who's very manly." And Annie, the chat would like to know what your dad is going to say, because the way that Joe describes Nick at the end of episode 9, I'm just going to be, and everybody else really, I'm just going to be curious to see what your dad thinks about that. But I think that Annie was really won over when she saw Nick's place. And to be fair, it was nice enough that I went, I mean, him and MAGA Megan are both weren't lying about their finances, I guess. Now, as they're talking about their families and how they will react to each other, Nick says that his mom is simply just going to be excited that she has a girlfriend. Moving on to Joe and Madison, who spent the night apart because she was upset and she woke up and she's doing some journaling. Initially, I thought that they had two bedrooms in their hotel room. However, in the morning when Joe comes back into the apartment, he has a bag and it looks like he actually left where they were. So he left for the evening. She's journaling and he comes in and tells her that how he reacted to her last night was insensitive and that he can take accountability for not coming out to hold her or make things better, and that he also apologizes for how things come out. I want to note that during this conversation, because I have been so critical of Joe, and I still am just really not how I feel about Joe because of the facial expressions and his body language being so opposite to the things that come out of his mouth a lot. But in this conversation, to note, this is the first time that we hear him, and Madison's brought this up before herself, that we hear him say, I love you first. And also the first time that we saw him go in for a kiss first. It was also one of the few times that we've heard him compliment her physically without being prompted. Like he greeted her by saying she was gorgeous. So the bar's in hell, but at least that's noted. Now, the couples in episode 7, they meet up for, like I said, appetizers and cocktails because God forbid we give them anything heavier. They may have to go take a shit, or who knows, they may even be able to handle their alcohol. I'm not sure which the producers think would be worse. Madison sits and talks with the girls and tells the girls that her and Joe have had great, passionate sex and that they just got over their first disagreement. One thing about Madison that we're going to hear Joe mention in a later episode is I initially thought that he was being unfair to her at like some of his criticisms, but Madison does sort of seem like she's in a fairy tale sometimes. And I know that we should depend on people to communicate how they're actually feeling, and yet simultaneously, it feels like more than a couple of times Madison has either overlooked a couple of red flags or just tries to talk about their relationship like as if they're doing better than they are. I don't necessarily think that Joe has been the most validating in their experience. However, I will say this is not the first time where she's talked about how they're having good sex. So that's clearly something that is doing well. Reminder to everybody as you're coming in and out, if you would like the live as you come in, and if you end up popping out because I am going over an episode you haven't seen, please like the live before you leave. The guys are sitting around and talking at the mixer, and Jordan is basically saying that he doesn't blame Madison for kicking Joe out of the room. And at first, it seems like he's saying this in jest before he has the realization that Joe was actually kicked out of the room and that he um spent the night apart. And I think it's clear that both Joe and Jordan were sort of like reprimanded by their partners for their actions. What's interesting right now is that Jordan hasn't vocalized, at least that we've seen, just how disappointed he was with how Megan conveyed her feelings. He says that he didn't really like, to the guys, Jordan says this. He didn't really like how Megan told him, "You're fucking annoying me right now," because he felt like it was very abrasive. And if he wanted someone to beat down on him or to make him feel badly about himself, that no offense, but Joe, you're right there. Like, I could have talked to you about that. He also talks about the fact that they won't really be seeing each other with their schedules unless it's on weekends. And presently, Jordan was feeling like that was a good thing because otherwise he might annoy Megan during the week. This is something, spoiler, but this is something by the end of episode 9 that we see a preview for that looks like it becomes an issue. The two of them are essentially two ships that pass each other in the middle of the night until it comes to the weekend time. And I will admit that that's probably very difficult to sink into a marriage when you have such opposite schedules. Jordan also talks about how he's not a crazy clingy person. So, since Megan owns a house out in LA, she's talking about buying a house in Denver, and leaving Denver isn't an option for him because Luca has a half sister. So, he needs to stay situated here. The episode progresses to Anxiety by Dochi overlaying as each one of the couples or singles right now, because they're not married, realize that the wedding date is just 3 weeks away. We hear KB make a passing comment, and there was a couple of passing comments that we hear just staggered in. The first one is KB saying that Edmund is not an alpha male, and that's scaring her a little because she describes herself as being a little bit arc, to quote her. And the night ends back in the bedroom with Nick and Annie with one of the stupidest arguments of all time, which again ultimately boils down to sobriety. If Annie was sober, there wouldn't have been a longer conversation. However, Annie is insecure, so this conversation actually probably would have happened eventually. But I will note this. In my notes, I have written that Nick's language has changed in how he's talking to Annie. Like at this moment in the episode, he's saying things like, I'm excited to be in your life. All the other guys at the party are not so sure what they're going to say either, discussing the fact that no guy knows what he's going to say on wedding day. And then adding in, I'm excited to get to know you even more. Just things that sounded like his mind wasn't remotely made up. And Annie was sitting there having told the girls earlier in the night, I would say I do tomorrow. So she spirals over this. And after Nick says this and she picks up on the change in language, she all of a sudden changes gears to either putting up walls or just outright being abrasive. But she starts insulting Nick and says, I don't need you in my life. It's a want. If you weren't in my life wouldn't fall apart, but I want you to be here. And basically, what she's saying is, if you're unsure of me, then I'll leave right now because my life won't fall apart if you're not here. And you should feel lucky that I want you in my life. That's the sense that I got from it. Are we still in episode 7? Yes, we are. Okay. The last 5 minutes of episode 7 ends with the couples each settling into their apartments. Edmund climbs into the pantry and gives KB a noticeable ick. Jordan and Megan have a conversation where Jordan tells Megan that he would have never gotten into this experience had he had any sort of worry over what Luca's mother, who we find out her name is Skylar, like over what her reaction would be or if there was any sort of tension between the two of them. He also assures Megan that Luca's mother will love her. I think that Jordan is arguably probably the best catch on the show, despite the fact that he drinks a chicken smoothie, which we will get into. Megan tells Jordan her worries with overstepping, also just being in the stepmother role, not having enough time to be with Luca, and then all of a sudden it being wedding day, and the episode ends. In my mind, their largest hurdles is going to be the way that their finances, like the security that they feel from money, their spending. I think that that's probably going to be the biggest hurdle. Annie tap danced on my nerves in these scene. These two are a yawn fest. Going back to Nick and Annie, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so that's how the episode ended. I'm seeing someone in the chat say that Edmund is them off their ADHD medication. And I have to say that I have, in fact, climbed in the pantry of an apartment. So when I saw Edmund do that, that certainly wasn't the least relatable thing that I've seen him do. Episode 8, rather than the title that Netflix has. I have renamed this episode to Marriage Minded People because it's a quote that comes up at some point in this episode, and I thought it was hilarious. We'll get to it when we get to it. Again, before you pop out, like the video, subscribe, make sure that you come back. Now, Annie and Nick at the start of this episode are discussing her crash out from the evening before, and she's saying that it took her a second to really accept the fact that she's already there and Nick is still getting there. We also learned that the last time that Nick has lived with somebody was 3.5 years ago. And I never knew that Nick was ever in a serious relationship. And I also wish that we got to hear the extent of what do you mean by living with somebody? Like it wasn't as specific as I would need. Have you ever lived with a partner before? Right? Like, have you lived with a roommate or have you lived with a partner? Thank you for coming back after episode 8. Yes, Sparkles is too fixated on Luca and his mom. Thank you. For people who are listening to this later on Spotify, as mentioned, this is a live episode. So when you hear random comments, I am reading the chat. Now, Nick tells Annie that what happened last night can't happen again because she basically put all of these words in his mouth, to which he had really said none of that. She says that it won't happen again. And I think that Annie pretty much just wants to get married to whomever. So she's just saying whatever right now. Her and Nick are very similar in that regard. Now, Madison and Joe are having a conversation in their kitchen that initially starts out very good. They're discussing the fact that her family is very excited for the two of them, that they will like Joe. And it transitions into how Madison doesn't show any worry on her face. And feeling so sure is making Joe feel isolated in this experience. And the comment he says is when she says, "Would you like me to be more worried?" He was like, I mean, yeah, it would make it feel a little more human, if I'm honest with you. And as much as Joe bothers me, correct me if I'm wrong in the chat and the comments later, I can see a little piece of what he's talking about. I see what Madison is saying tenfold. No, of course you don't. Like, what do you want from her? You want her to be negative? No, but it is just like a strange experience. And it seems like Joe knew what he signed up for, right? It's a quick marriage, it's getting to know somebody. But signing up for something, the same way that you can commit to a job and then you have training day or your first week and decide, this is this is not what I thought it would be. On paper, one thing, actually living it and doing it, no. So it is just a lot, right? And I don't know if anybody has ever moved in shortly after dating somebody or made a decision like that. But speaking from experience, I have, right? And it's worked out great for me because we passed our 7-year anniversary. But I do remember the first time, it was week 1 moving into our apartment together. And we had been dating such a short time to move in together and out in across the country in California. The first time that I took a hit of weed, mind you, I smoke weed all the time. I was out in California. I'm going to go to the dispensary. I literally sat there and spiraled and thought, why am I here? What am I doing here? How are you here? Why are we like, this guy doesn't even know me. Like, he's known me like 3 months. Like I had such a spiral and then everything was okay, right? Then everything was okay. But sometimes just like that sudden, like everything feeling all at once, you know, if you know, right? But Joe's pretty much wrong a lot of the times. In this conversation, I sort of know what both of them were saying. I know what Madison was saying. You're getting into this experience. What do you mean you aren't prepared? I understand what Joe was saying, that he's just kind of feeling isolated in this experience. Additionally, when Joe brings something up to Madison, to be a fair reviewer, Madison does get frantic, and she gets frantic quickly. And she is reacting to something that is like, that's why it's called a reaction. It's stirring something up in her. She is reacting to something that he is saying, but just pointing out for the ability of having a full conversation, it does sort of shut the conversation down a bit to have such a frantic reaction. I am not comparing Madison's reactions to Edmund's, but in the same way that Edmund's overreactions or emotional, um, just how emotional he can get, the franticness, that can sort of shut a conversation down as well. And I see some of that with Madison as well. I'm no Joe defender, but she cuts him off a lot too. And yeah, like I just want to be fair. Like I'm just sort of seeing a little bit on both sides. Now Madison ends the conversation by saying, "I feel like I just need to be more of a negative bitch." Like and then Joe says, "No, like I just basically want to be able to tell you something without you acting like it's the end of the world." And then he goes, "I didn't mean that." Joe is a man. Joe is a man. And when we find out what we find out, either towards the middle of this episode or the start of next episode, I'm like, did we know this about Joe? Because with this added context, your communication should be just a bit better with women, just a bit better. But Joe tells Madison that this experience is crazy. And that's is when she responded, "This is for marriage-minded people." And her saying marriage-minded people, I don't know, it just did something for me. Usually people say marriage material, but marriage-minded just kind of rolled off the tongue. Jordan, this is one of my favorite episodes. We get to see everybody's apartment, and Jordan goes first. Jordan shows Megan his apartment, which was very clean. And initially, I thought was a studio apartment just because, by the looks of it, it looks like Jordan sleeps in the living room, and then Luca has his own bedroom. If Jordan gave up having a room so that his son could have a bedroom, I think that that's absolutely adorable. Although we know that MAGA, Megan, Megan is MAGA. I don't think that Jordan comes across MAGA. I think a lot of things he does, not saying that this room thing, we'll get to why I think that, but I don't think Jordan comes across MAGA. Tell me what you think in the comments. He is a white man, so I'll leave about 70% up in the air. But 30% of me thinks I'm getting the MAGA vibe from him. Anyways, his apartment was cute. Luca's bedroom was adorable, and I thought it was very sweet that on Luca's bed, which was spaceship themed, was a toy that his friend had made him. It was also a little girl, and it was basically a crocheted bear with a glucose pump and an insulin monitor. I'm sorry, an insulin pump and a glucose meter. That was adorable. The two of them end up having an emotional moment there because, again, Megan has a personal experience with her father who had diabetes, and ultimately it caused a lot of complications for him towards the end of his life and throughout his life. So she's imagining that for Jordan's child. Also, pause, because Jordan might have the best clothing style on the show. Chicken smoothie, like I might have to get used to it and just how red his face gets, because overall, Jordan's just a pretty likable guy. Okay. Now, Allie and Anton have breakfast back at their apartment, and they both work overnight shifts, which sounds like they would both have a very compatible lifestyle. However, we're seeing a lot of differences. Anton loves to drink. Allie, not so much. In fact, part of why she hates Denver is she doesn't like the party culture. She doesn't want to be around it all of the time. Um, Additionally, Allie would like to spend a lot of money on Botox and just have the things that she has. She's going to be back in school soon. She was used to not working, not cooking, not cleaning when she was last in school and lived with her mom. And she's sort of expecting a similar setup with Anton. But they have breakfast, and we learned that Anton, I guess, drives trucks or either trains new drivers who drive like the large semi trucks. And Allie is a nurse who, like I said, has plans to go back to school. Now, Anton went upon hearing how Allie's setup was last time she was in school, says that he would need her to work 1 or 2 days a week, and then they should be okay on his salary. He also starts talking about what their accounts would look like, and he would like to have one joint checking account, while Allie would like to have a joint checking account, but also independent checking accounts, mainly so that she can spend money on Botox without Anton knowing the exact dollar amount. Would I be able to just have a joint checking account? No. I spend on frivolous things all of the time. Is Botox one of them? No. Continuing. Edmund's mom comes over to meet Calabria, and things go great at first. And things ultimately go great, but, like, at one point while KB steps out, which I'll get to in a second, I was wondering how his mom really felt. But she comes in and she was very welcoming towards KB. She said that she has beads for her that are culturally symbolic that she gives to all of her daughter-in-laws that she forgot that day. She also talks about how KB will be coming with her to Ghana, and she talks about how when and if they have grandchildren, she will be teaching them to eat as they do in Ghana when they go to Ghana with their hands. And like I said, things initially are going very well. Put in the comments or in the chat now what you thought, and it doesn't have to be at first, but overall, what did you think about Edmund's mom meeting KB? Did she like her? What general sense did you have? Now, KB steps out for a few minutes, and Edmund's mom says that, and from my recollection, that her and her sister, so I guess Edmund's aunt, were on Instagram, looked at KB's page, and immediately said, nah. But meeting KB in person, she likes her. She can also feel it for them and understands how the two of them fit together. I did think it was funny that when Edmund's mom first met KB, she asked him, did a coconut hit you? What made you pick Edmund? But I just thought it was shocking. Like, I thought, I'm really glad that she was so kind to KB, but I was just surprised to hear for a second that she had a negative impression of Calabria. Is it am I saying it right? Like, all of a sudden I feel like I'm saying it wrong. That and then I also remember looking at KB's Instagram, and now I'm gonna have to go back and look, so I have the lens of, like, what they were looking at. Continuing on. KB comes back into the apartment, and when she comes back in, Edmund's mom was talking about her daughter-in-laws, and basically how her daughter-in-laws rat her out to her sons. And and basically she was checking to see if KB was going to do the same thing. And KB says Edmund doesn't have to know everything that's going on. And Edmund's mom tells KB that she is the first of 4 daughter-in-laws who have said that, and that she hates that when that happens. The other 4 daughter-in-laws watching. uh, I thought that was funny, but that would make me feel great if I was her. Now fast forward to, so overall the interaction went well. Edmund's mom vocalized how he felt before meeting KB, but meeting her, she likes her. Now we see Madison seeing Joe's apartment. And Joe's apartment looked like what I thought Jordan's apartment was going to look like. She also has her ring back on because the night before, as Joe was asking her to be more worried, she said, let's put this thing on ice, and put her ring back in the box. Joe had like a studio apartment. He had a small little stove, and Joe's apartment is nice enough, but there's definitely not room for the two of them, likely, especially because Madison has lights that turn on and are motion censored. It's just a little too trapped in there. It's just a little too much stuff. I also think that they may be what Madison described as front loading conflict early on in their relationship and getting over things. But I don't necessarily think that it means that they're better off for it. But Joe had lots of self-help books. Um, his setup did look like a hotel. Madison was right. It was basically like the same rack that they have in the corner, and he had lots of meat in his freezer. The question is Joe MAGA? Statistically, probably yes. The meat in the fridge made me think yes, even more so. Now, Sparkle Megan's family has a lunch where they are honoring the fourth anniversary of the passing of her father. And Jordan is coming along to this lunch, and this is his first time tagging along. I thought that Jordan was very accountable during this conversation. And overall, I felt like the meeting between Megan's family went very well. Um, so Megan tells her family that Jordan's son, Luca, also has diabetes, and both her mom and presumably her sister begin to cry on the spot. Her sister also reveals that she had a dream recently where she was talking to their father, who said to her, her son is like me. It's the only way that I could get her to know. And listen, that's a hell of a sign. That's a hell of a sign. Okay. I'm not going to doubt that. Jordan, they end up having a conversation about kids. And Jordan has either already gotten snipped or said he plans to get snipped and then get it reversed. And we're talking about a vasectomy if him and his wife decide that they would like to have more children in the family. Um, and I do want to say Megan's family commented that that was very progressive of them. So I'm like, okay, her family's I already knew she's MAGA. Her family definitely conservative. It will be interesting to see because, like I said, I'm not getting that vibe from Megan. I mean, from Jordan. Megan goes to the bathroom, and while she's gone, Jordan asks her mom's blessing that he can get married to Megan. And it's at this point where I'm like, I think he seems pretty serious and pretty intentional about this process. Wedding day, unless something happens with either the meeting of Luca or their schedules just do not blend well, I could see him right now saying yes, especially because he asked her mom's permission. Now, Annie goes and sees Nick's place in the mountains. And I'm not going to lie, I did not think he lived in the mountains. That was like one of the most shocking things in this batch of episodes. He actually did live in the mountains. It actually was a house, it was a log cabin, like a frame, I think. He has a garage, he had a classic car, he has multiple motorcycles. Everything was decorated just as quaint and cute as I thought it would be. Okay. And as clean. And Annie even has a reaction where she says, like, I see why you're out here and I wouldn't want to make you leave. 10 minutes later, though, Annie is basically like, well, you know, you have to come back with me because for right now I can't leave. However, Nick plans to keep his space. It sounds like he bought his home. He said he would have to sell it. So it sounds like they would have two places, and I bet you, knowing Annie and how she's presented, that's going to lead to further insecurity down the line as well, just knowing that he has that second place. But we shall see. Heading to dinner with Joe's family, meeting Madison for the very first time. Um, Initially, I had in my notes that as Madison was talking, again, when she talks about her and Joe's relationship, it just felt like a fairy tale when in reality they've had more than a couple of hiccups, and Joe hasn't necessarily been the most validating person. However, the interaction, like I said, goes better than I expected. This is the moment that I'm like, I don't think we knew this. Joe's family asks how Madison felt about him being engaged one time before. If we knew this, I either have selective hearing or my ADHD just simply won't allow me to catch everything. I missed that. That's the first time me, Leah, from Positively Uncensored heard that. I'm like, Joe, you were engaged? I don't remember that at all. Joe says in his confessional that, of course, Madison clicked with his family, that he feels much closer to her, and that seeing Madison talk with his family and be with them and hearing her talk tonight just showed him that Madison is very much exactly who he fell in love with in the pods. Again, pausing for the moments where I'm not as disappointed in Joe as I was before. I perhaps may have been a bit too harsh on him, and as always, reserve the right to change my mind. However, the preview for them upcoming doesn't look so hot, so I'm going to trust my gut as well. Now, what is so interesting to me is Anton and Allie are sort of talked about like they're the mom and dad of the couple, the happy couple, but she hasn't met any of his family and he doesn't meet any of her family. At least not from my recollection, because right now they're meeting up with Joe's friends. I'm sorry, with Anton's friends, who ends up being a guy named Joe, who Anton has known for a long time, and his partner, Melissa. They have been dating for 4 months. They live together, and they're in a very similar experience because after their first date, they both moved in together. So this was honestly, you couldn't pick a better couple for Anton and Allie to go out with because, like I said, that's almost the same situation. However, Anton and Allie don't know each other the way that Joe and his partner do. And we're going to uncover that. And the reason being, because the Anton and Allie met in a bubble, he has been able to portray the version of himself that sounds good, the version of himself that's his best self, that's who he would like to be, that sounds good and marriage material. And as stated, in a bubble, not around or out in the public for friends or family members to jump in the gate and be like, who said that? So he's really able to like sell her this version of himself versus their friends who seemingly met organically or have at least been out in the wild, if you will, with each other. And she, the partner, seemed to know a lot about Joe and his ways compared to what Allie knows about Anton. But I'm going a little ahead of myself because this is the conversation as stated where we learned that Allie doesn't really like Denver and that her and Anton have talked about moving to Florida and that she doesn't want to be in this party scene anymore, but it's really more of the lifestyle in Florida, being outside, the activity, all of that. The girls go to the bathroom and do what we do best, talk. And this is why it's important that women gossip. We've talked about the fact that gossip saves women's lives and they've tried to demonize women gossiping. Is it not biblical that we shouldn't gossip? Like they try to demonize gossiping, but number one, as just stated, it saves women's lives. And number two, without gossiping, we wouldn't know a lot about men's behaviors. And that's really what a lot of gossip is. So in the bathroom, we hear Anton get told by his friend Joe, respectfully, I gave it 2 weeks. I thought that you would be in this relationship for 2 weeks and then you would fly back and go back to your old ways. Meanwhile, his girlfriend's in the bathroom spilling the tea. And she says, I can't believe that Anton's getting married. To which Allie is like, why? Was he not the marriage type before this? And Melissa says, not really. No, to be honest with you. And then we hear whatever happens in between this. The next question we hear from Melissa is just one question for you about the bachelor party. They're not going to a strip club, right? And Melissa informs her that Anton and Joe love the strip clubs. Anton especially loves the strip clubs, that they like to go together, and she doesn't like that. As she's saying this, I believe her. She's trying to let the woman who's getting married soon know, hey, they're boys, they're best friends. I don't want him to go to this. Can you check your husband and make sure that he doesn't do this? Because honestly, the two of them, when they get together, are both diabolical. She's trying to get a pulse and get her hand in the situation. So I believe her immediately. Immediately, I don't believe Anton and whatever his response was to this. Okay. Um, where was I? Okay. Now, Allie tells Melissa, because we're still in the bathroom, that what she's heard is that Joe was really more of the party guy and that Anton wasn't. Like that Joe was Anton's crazy friend. And Melissa's like, okay, no. The two of them were definitely the partiers, but it was a couple of months ago and they were both single and they both partied a lot. So clearly, when Melissa met Joe, he was in the party scene. She knows what he's like. Meanwhile, Anton tried to paint his life to his future wife as if he was like the good boy in the group, never doing anything bad. But his friend Joe could be a bad influence. I'd also like to say that if Allie doesn't like to drink, and as somebody who doesn't like to drink either, and doesn't sign up to be in a social setting where it's just based around drinking, it's not my cup of tea. If I was Allie, even the fact that he knows that, and then the plan right now is to get tequila shots, call me a stick in the mud if you want. I'm 30 years old. No, no, we're meeting up so I can meet your friends. Like to me, as someone who doesn't enjoy drinking, that doesn't sound fun to me. And it doesn't seem like Allie really enjoys drinking either. I also thought it was interesting that when they had breakfast after their night shift, that Anton had poured up mimosas for them because yes, maybe it helps you sleep better if you're about to lie down, but it seemed like he wanted to make this a regular thing. And I could see Allie's eyebrows rise at that. When the girls get back from the bathroom, they sit down and Allie brings up that Anton's in trouble right in front of the group. So Melissa's probably like, fuck. And Joe's probably like, fuck. Okay. And Anton's probably like, fuck. Okay. And then says that they will talk about it later. That's the end of episode 8. Episode 9 starts out with Jordan making a drink that they possibly serve. You know how when you get to a nice hotel, they have, or like a resort, you go to a resort and someone is standing there with champagne. The housewives have it all the time. Would you like champagne? In hell, they would have Jordan's drink. They would have hot chicken breast with Crystal Light lemon blended up with water and protein powder, presumably, as you're entering shot. That's disgusting. 50 grams of protein, my ass. I would genuinely rather take it anally than orally. Like, not really, but that's so disgusting. I can literally think of a million things I would rather drink than that. In Edwin and KB's, is it Edwin or Edmund? All of a sudden, I'm writing Edwin in my notes. Pretty sure it's Edmund. Edmund got KB roller skates, and we also saw the somewhat low-key Amazon ad. They have to put that box up there. They do this basically every season. I forget what they were advertising last season of Love is Blind. I think it was like Dura mattresses or their home security system. Thank God it's not that again. The couples meet up in episode 9. And this is the episode where at first it's just the couples and then the singles arrive. And that's when shit starts to get stirred up. They meet at this presumably restaurant or bar, which is completely empty and has an electric bull. And the first hour of their meeting was so awkward. This is a party that I just wouldn't want to be at. Okay. The girls are chatting as they do, and Megan tells the girls that she met Luca's mom last night and that things felt very normal. There was clearly no tension between Jordan and Skylar, and that there was no tension between the two of them either. Allie tells the girls that they've not met any friends. I'm sorry, they've not met anybody besides friends, no family. She also reveals that Anton used to go to strip clubs all the time, and she adds that for her, that's not okay for people who are in relationships. Mind you, Anton wasn't in a relationship, but Allie adds that it's not okay for her, period. I think when Allie bragged in either the preview that they showed us or at some point in the pods that she knew how to throw a grenade, I'm assuming that she's very conservative. And I'm assuming that she's very conservative, at least with how she feels about some things regarding relationships or lust, or I'm not even sure what to call it. But if Anton goes out and spends 3 racks every week and that's just his hobby, that's insane, right? But if him and his friends, when single, have gone to a strip club to get wings and watch the game, I don't necessarily think that that makes him, like, less of a serious person. However, I do think that Anton was 100% a partier. Maybe Melissa's disclosing this because while there, he was not appropriate. Maybe he didn't tip well. Maybe he always got a private. I don't know. But just in terms of Allie's response, I thought that personally it was like a bit strange. However, when she says that when Anton gets home from working overnight every morning, that he starts the morning before he presumably goes back to bed by drinking 1 to 2 beers, out. You're out, because regardless of the fact that you work night shift, it's feeling like an alcoholic. Like, it's feeling alcoholic. Like, every day, to me, even when the white women have, like, shirts on, it's like, "It's 1 o'clock," and it's, like, 5 p.m. every day, and they have their, like, 6 glasses of wine. I'm like, "Baby, you're an alcoholic. Like, honey, you need to go to AA. There's an issue here." Like, there's an issue here with this being so incorporated in your routine. My personal opinion. Am I saying Anton's an alcoholic? No. Let me be mindful about the things I'm saying. I'm saying that lifestyle wouldn't appeal to me either, at least with that. Now, I went around a little because Allie was telling girls the dish about what was happening in the apartment. But Patrick shows up at the party and he tells the guys that he hasn't seen Casey since being in Denver. And they haven't seen each other since they broke up. And they did not see each other one-on-one when he went back to Denver. Watching Patrick feels like watching people back in high school. He's not sure of himself, but he cosplays as sure of himself. He tries to fit in with the boys. He he performs masculinity and brotherhood. It's very strange. I know that with the nuance of the lens of Patrick's either identity issues or like self-acceptance, I know that there's an added lens of Patrick does this because of white supremacy, but it's just like uncomfortable to watch Patrick because we are seeing that, like, I don't know who Patrick is. Like, Patrick is just like a very I don't know, Patrick's just a strange guy. Like, Patrick's a little bit of a bullshitter. Like, I feel for everything that he is going through, again, with his identity issues, and don't wanna comment on that, but as far as, like, a person, like, Patrick's kind of a bullshitter. Like, he kind of, like, bullshits a lot of things, and I'll get to that more in a second. But he's right, right? Casey wouldn't take a phone call. She wouldn't meet up, wouldn't give the ring back. I did muster through watching Casey on the Vile Files, and all I basically got from that was she wasn't sorry. She's had horrible, yeah, I'm gonna say it. She's had horrible work done as far as it goes cosmetically. She looks like a completely different person. Um, she grew out her hair, which looks bad. And yeah, so she's pretty much not sorry, but she does say that Patrick lied about her not wanting to meet up, that she did respond to him. In my mind, the two of them are both sort of bullshitting the situation. But let's be clear, it's still KK Casey. Like, she was being racist for the reasons in which she didn't like Patrick. But as far as the actual details that went down, could Patrick be over exaggerating a couple of details? Maybe. Maybe. Casey claims that she has receipts. I didn't look to her page to see, and I won't be. But he also says that Casey feels like Patrick is not the only person who was hurt. She was hurt as well, and she will be keeping the ring. And Patrick is most upset about the fact that it just took her a couple of hours to end it, and she could have at least tried to stick with things for 24 hours. And to that specific element, I disagree with Patrick, because I think that it's better for you. It would be better had Casey been able to wear the villain hat. You're a villain. You're a villain. You're a bad person. You're a racist. You need to own it, and you need to walk in there, and you need to know that because you're a white woman with blonde hair, blue eyes, and you're Mormon, there would still be people who would have rooted for you anyways, right? It wouldn't be any of us, but you would have found people would still be rooting for you, unfortunately. So, but that being said, had she been direct about it, you know, I'm just not attracted to you, I'm pulling out. Ultimately, though, her removing herself from the situation and not trying to continue was the most respectful part of what she did. The way she dealt with things, horrible, but it's better to have her leave and show both viewers and Patrick she was a liar. She wanted exposure. She wanted to grow her name. She wanted revenge on her ex-boyfriend, but she didn't want a relationship. Like, she didn't want a relationship, and she's materialistic and she's vain. Okay? Looks are very important to her. It would just be better if all of that was out there. Jordan has a conversation with Brendan. This was interesting. They have a conversation about Annie, and Jordan basically tells Brendan, listen, you're better off. You're better off. Not really, but he basically says, Annie's fucking weird. Annie's weird. Okay. And Nick is weird too. And the two of them, they're very quirky. But you and Annie, I can't see you guys together. You're very smooth. She's very Annie Banani. I can't see the two of you together. And honestly, Jordan, you're not wrong. Like, 3 points for Hufflepuff this episode. Like, Jordan, you're right. Okay. He also ends by telling Brendan, you just need to let it go. You just need to let it go, man. Well, meanwhile, Joe is giving the complete opposite advice, and he thinks that Brendan should keep applying pressure. Brendan, you're one of the better looking guys on the show, and Annie's weird. And like, I personally would be offended that she chose me over my competition because I'm an Aquarius. I have a bit of an ego. That would be enough for me, right? I wouldn't be attempting something. Now, Mike, who's Maha, apparently, okay, Maha Mike with the acne craters on his fucking face, pulls Megan to the side to basically try to check the temperature and see if there's still a chance. He also takes the opportunity, as he always does, to throw some shade at Jordan, sprinkle, sprinkle, and lets her know that he would have got her the emerald cut ring that she wanted. That is such a bonehead comment, That's something that men say, like, I can't explain it, but that's, like, such a specific comment that you would make to try to humble another man. It's also rude. It's also awkward as you, the person wearing the ring, like, "Huh, this is nice. Like, what do you mean?" But anyways, I didn't love like, ultimately, Megan shuts Mike down, but I don't love, like, her being like, "Yeah, like, of course there's chemistry." Like, shut him down. He's trying to talk about Jordan. He talked about Jordan's kid. He's being weird. But ultimately, she does shut him down. She says she appreciates him not DMing her because she's in it. When asked if she's going to do the thing then and get married, she says yes. Now, Patrick sees Anna arrive, and in front of the group, he's like, "Anna, what's up, Anna? Anna, you're my number one, Anna, Anna." And he's like, "Why'd you leave me, Anna? You and I would have gone all the way, Anna." And she pulls him aside and she's like, "Yeah, we should talk about that." And this is what I meant when I said that Patrick's a bullshitter, right? And Anna tells him this. She's like, "It's not fair for you to say I was always your number one when you proposed and said I love you to somebody else." And he tells Anna that it was her over Casey by a mile, and Casey was a distant number two choice. Whack her again, Patrick. Get her again. I don't feel bad for Casey at all for that. You know what? You deserve that comment. From Patrick, you deserve that comment. However, again, you're a bullshitter. You're a bullshitter. Like you're saying and playing nice to like whomever is sitting in front of you. Do I believe that Patrick and Anna had a genuine connection? And in the pods, I do. Do I believe Patrick in this moment? No. Oh my gosh, I'm seeing in the chat KKK Casey is ready for perfect match. That she is. That she is. Let's see. Okay. At this party, they're all standing around and Annie makes a passing comment where she tells Nick, "You're so perfect." And who hears it other than Edmund? And Edmund's like, "Wow, that's a nice thing to hear. That would be such a lovely thing to hear." And KB's like, "What? Are you admiring or are you comparing? Like, you can admire, but don't compare our relationship." Because essentially, what Edmund was saying and does say off in the corner is that he's not getting any nice compliments from KB and he wants to be complimented more. He asks her though, when's the last time that you said something nice to me? To which she's like, "Last night." Like, "Why are you doing this here?" To which Edmund now says that he doesn't want to do things here, despite the fact that he did in fact make things awkward and he did start this interaction. Now KB tells Edmund to have a good night because she's going to have a good night and that he's being very weird. Instead of leaving her alone, he approaches her. We don't know the length of time. Let's say 10 minutes later, and says, "I love you, KB." And things escalate again. And I'm not going to lie, I don't even remember what KB's question was for Edmund. So I'm not too sure that he does either. She keeps asking him, "Why aren't you answering the question?" However, can you restate the question? Because right now, I don't even remember the question either. But Edmund just isn't reading the cues because he should have just left the situation alone or at least tried to understand. You're there, Edmund. I'm not. Figure it out. Okay. But he goes up to the guys after this interaction and says, "I might die tonight." And Jordan grabs him by the shoulders and is like, "Walk back there, be accountable, and apologize." See, 4 points for Hufflepuff. Like, Jordan is not annoying me at all this episode. Meanwhile, it was awkward, by the way, as Nick was like, "Oh no, like I'm not perfect." Like they made the whole group feel awkward with whatever they had going on there. I will say though, KB looked great in her shorts and her Western attire. She looked super cute. Now, Nick pulled Kate to the side in this episode and gives her a very bullshit, very calculated, very scripted apology and tells her that he has never been in love with two people before and he should have just been way more direct with her. Um, Kate tells Nick that you told me that you can't get there with Annie. And then all of a sudden, you're saying that you love her more than me. Nick denies this. To be fair, I don't remember this, but I bet you that he did. Okay. Now, off to the side, Annie is watching this conversation and talking with Allie, who tells Annie that whole I love you more than her thing. That was the same exact story that I heard from Kate. And at this point, Annie is pissed. So when Nick comes up to her and tries to be jokey and ask if she's going to ride the bull or if he should ride it again, she's ignoring him and giving him the cold shoulder. Now, towards the end of the night, Joe is back in his cups again. And when he's standing next to Jordan and he's in his cups, he's going to say something that the cameras want to hear. And he questions if Brendan should be putting in more work with Annie, followed by his observation that Nick only does missionary. You know that, he says to Jordan. And he lays her on her back, then goes skiing. That's what Nick does. And Jordan tells him that he's right, but to shut the fuck up. That's how that conversation goes. Then they get drunk Joe outside on camera because since he's gabbing, they want to hear more naturally. And I typed out what Joe said, and I'll do my best to act it out. Nick is kind of a guy, great guy, some would say. Anyways, I don't fuck with him too much. He could be the best guy in the entire world. He ain't my guy, but great hat tonight. I thought it was personally hilarious. Great hat. Mind you, the hat was awful. The hat was absolutely awful. Now, Madison is clearly best friends with Kate, and they talk in the corner, and she's like, hey, it seems like a lot of people don't like Nick. And she's like, yeah. Kate's like, nobody likes him. It's because he's calculated. Meanwhile, Madison can't stop talking about great sex with Joe. So she lets everybody know that Joe told her that he wants to get her pregnant and they have great sex. At the very least, I think Joe acts differently with Madison off camera than on. At the very least, that's what I think. The night and the episode ends with Edmund standing alone, pondering how he can talk to KB because she's angry at him. Madison judging Joe for ordering more shots. And Allie glaring at Anton taking more shots and still thinking about what Melissa told her in the bathroom and where Anton's going to have his bachelor party. Because at this point, we know that Anton's not just going to have the bachelor party that they throw for them on Love is Blind. If producers had half of a fucking brain cell, we would have been seeing more salacious bachelor parties by now because it's an opportunity for mayhem. Let them do what they want to do, bleep out the faces, and show us what the night is. Let them plan their own bachelor party and figure out your money. You've got more than enough. You're with Netflix. Pay the venues what you have to pay to be in there. Like, get the fuck out of here with these stupid bachelor parties. Okay. That's number one. Number two, I don't think anybody should have gone on the honeymoon until we saw them in Denver. This should have been first. I still think this should have come first. And then the honeymoon should be last after wedding day. Almost like that stupid episode they try to give us as if we care, like catching up with the cast. Like, no, Do it after the wedding. Let us see them now on their honeymoon, how things are settling in, how they're feeling, if they're still feeling. The whole show needs restructured. I don't feel confident about any of them. I feel confident about a singular person who seems ready for marriage, and that's Jordan. Jordan seems ready for marriage. I hope that everybody puts all of their thoughts in the comments. Thank you for talking with me about Love is Blind this fine Wednesday afternoon. Enjoy the fall weather if you are having it. I know that my friends in Texas are still in the 90s. Praying for you. Okay. And like I said, comment, let me know what you're thinking. And everybody have a great rest of your day. Bye.